Thank you for joining us for today's episode of Two Old Sexperts. I'm one of your hosts, Shawn McGill, joined by my friend and podcast co host, Sharon Potter. Today, we're talking about loneliness and how it impacts each of us, but also those with disabilities. As we're embarking upon this topic of loneliness, we experience it, and it's a big problem for us as human beings. But you had mentioned and brought up the good point. I mean, how do you know and work with people who are on the autism spectrum or who are non-speaking to try to help fill the void of loneliness for them?
I mean, we can rationalize, well, I have six kids and five of them are in different parts of the country. I have 11 grandkids. They're in college or, I don't get to see them. I miss them. And then, I mean, the big thing for all of us, the world, was the last 3 years, the pandemic, when everything shut down and, whatever social connections we had got deleted in some form or to some degree. And I mean, I just can't even imagine what it was like for people who were already lonely. They then couldn't go anywhere or do anything. I mean, I have a cousin who works in a program that supports people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And I mean, she said they lost two people. I mean, they lost physically, people died more. And these were people who were not particularly ill when the pandemic started. They just spiraled down. And when you think about loneliness, I mean, what are the things that can happen? The physical things. I mean, it affects your body. I think people are more prone to heart attacks and strokes. And, we need to do more about that. I mean, for ourselves too. I mean, I kind of make myself go for a walk every day.
And that is one of the when you just even research, because I'm prepping for this, I thought, oh my gosh, I don't want to just sit and complain about how lonely I feel as a human and my sort of hypocrisy in trying to help other people manage some of these feelings. But when you just look at the basic research, getting outside, before we got on, my life is so crazy and I have dirt under my fingers. I was just pulling weeds, just taking
Oh,
5 minutes
good.
to pull
That's a good
weeds.
thing.
That can give you that sort of boost during your day to just feel better too.
Yeah. Yeah, I always feel better when I make myself go for a walk. And I had a funny thing happen. You and I are alike in so many ways. And there's a particular place that I walk, and I always walk it alone. And there's a group of women who belong to this club, and they walk also. And I know one or two of them. There's five or six. I'm walking alone, and there's five or six of them, and never once did they say, "Come join us." I mean, we're all walking around. You would do that in a minute, and I would also, and I have done that. But it's just people don't see it. They don't, and well, they're not going to look at me and say, "Oh, look at that lonely woman." But at the same time, just sort of basic human caring for each other. Come on, come walk with me. Or I just am always so shocked when intelligent, so-called intelligent, successful people behave in a way that doesn't seem like they care about anything but themselves.
And I think that's the disheartening part. And that's where I've become sort of this jaded human being. Growing up, even in high school, I remember, people with disability, excuse me, who were in the lunchroom and no one would sit with them. I would be the person who would go over and say, "Do you mind if I join you?" And
Yeah,
I
me too. Me too.
we talk about trying to teach people how to do this work. What I've found, and I feel kind of bad even saying this, you can teach skills, but you can't teach people to be really good human beings. Either you have that in you. I mean, we'll keep trying. You either have it in you naturally, and that's how you see people and you see the world, or you don't.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. And it doesn't mean they're bad people. They just don't get it. They don't, it's probably something that happened, not an event that happened to them, but the way they were raised. Don't talk to those people, or, you belong in this group. And I mean, when Tom and I lived in Harrisburg, we used to meet often on Friday at a local hotel where there was a wonderful man that sang and played the piano. We'd have a couple, drinks at the end of the week, and we'd meet there. But one time he said, "Yeah, I'll meet you at the corner of whatever, and we'll walk over." So we did, and as we walked over, we saw three or four homeless people that I knew them all. And they said, "Hey, Sharon, how you doing?" And I would say, "Oh, Mary, how did it go with that housing thing?" And we got there and he just looked at me and said, "How do you know these people?" I said, "Well, if I'm going in for a cup of coffee and there's somebody outside, I'm going to get 2 cups of coffee. Like, how do you not do that?" But some people just don't. And they're afraid or they don't understand and they just want to leave them alone. They don't want to bother them. But I don't know. It's just worth it to kind of reach out and try. Yeah, I think about, like people with broken hearts. That's not only that you're sad in your heart, but it has physical things on your body. It takes its toll for sure.
There's still, I think, shame in expressing loneliness. So for me, I feel shame in saying I'm lonely, and I'm
Yeah,
busy and doing all kinds of things, and people think, yeah, you have this perfect life. Loneliness
yeah,
is the number one thing that I deal with, but we don't talk about it because there's still some shame and stigma attached to that.
yeah. Push ourselves out there, but the people we support can't always do that. They can't just say, first of all, rationalizing that they are lonely, and then second, doing something about it, unless we, the people that support them, get that and try to help them understand that they are lonely. And let's go to the park, or there's a festival coming up. Let's all go to that. But at the same time, when I say talk to them, it's we, the paid people. It's that what about their social circle, and is there one other than the people that live in the home or in the residential program?
Yeah, and what I've discovered over the years, you can be around a lot of people, as we often are around a lot of people, but you
Yeah.
can still feel very lonely because there isn't quality or there isn't meaning
Yes.
with the interactions with those people too. So when I go into group homes and I see staff sadly sitting and looking at their phones or talking on their phones, it feels lonely to me. You can be in my presence but not acknowledge me in any way, and it's very lonely. So we contribute to that problem in many ways
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. I had an interesting thing. I went with a friend who's in her mid 80s to visit her partner who's in a nursing home temporarily. In fact, I think he got out yesterday, but went back to his home. But he had a roommate, and this man had dementia, and his daughter was there. And I said hello to him, and I don't know how the conversation got to that, but he said he was an architect. And I said, "Oh," but I said, "Oh, my husband was an architect." Now, this was a man who was not connecting, to the world around him. And he said, "What was his name?" And I said, "Tom Potter." And he said, "Was he a colored fellow?" I said, "Yes, he was." And he said, "Oh my God, I'm 92." And so obviously I was older, but he was my mentor. And he was a remarkable man. And I had this project once and I couldn't figure this out. And he came over and said, "If you look at this angle and you do that, I mean, he came right out in all these details that he remembered. And it was so nice. And when I was leaving, his daughter hugged me and she was pretty teary. And she said, I can't tell you what that meant to me, because she brought, the conversation about someone that he knew and cared about brought him back.
Yes, and that, we're seeing more and more people with dementia in our service system too. And I just did a training 2 days ago on it. The long-term memory bank is often still there until the
Yes.
very end stage. Making those connections, talking to people about their life. Sometimes we go, "Oh my gosh, don't do it because it's going to create behaviors, it's going to create problems."
Yeah. The
But
behaviors.
yeah, the opposite is true. Doing it really brings meaning and purpose into the day for people too.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And then I also think that, when you think about abuse and victimization, if you're lonely, you are an absolute target. I mean, someone is really nice to you. They come up behind you and rub your shoulders, and it's just so nice to be touched and just relax a little bit. And then it goes on and on. And you don't even know you're being victimized. Well, you might know that, but you don't even care, because for those few moments you feel loved and cared for. When people are isolated, they're really easy targets for victimization.
Well, when we're lonely, we tolerate a lot more too, because we don't want to lose the companionship. We don't want to lose the positive attributes of a relationship. We put up with it. And a lot of times it does borderline abuse, being called
Yeah.
terrible names, being threatened. being yelled at, but we still hang on to that relationship because somehow that's better than being alone.
Yeah,
I think that does contribute. We spend a lot of time talking about problematic sexual behaviors. We spend a lot of time talking about abuse. And I think the loneliness factor ties in heavily,
absolutely.
all of those things.
Yeah. I mean, what the heck? I won't be lonely for 15 minutes. I'll do anything. I mean, it's so sad to think about. I mean, I don't mean like we're going to solve the problems of the world, but and when I say we, I mean the whole support system. And there are people that are doing things to deal with this. Activities. They might have a once a month social hour, or afternoon or evening or whatever, and bring people together and go to a movie. Ask two friends, and we'll all go to a movie. But something that brings people together. Then you have who's on shift and what vehicles are available and what does the budget look like and all of those issues. But I think it's so important to get people out into the public or bring friends into your home. There have to be ways to do that. And there are, and many
There
people are
are
doing.
ways. Yeah.
Yeah.
We have a behavior support organization here, but one of the things that we do, and we had you join, was weekly groups. And it's kind of like herding cats because we have so many people in the group. And I said I was getting disgusted because we try to do a lesson, but everybody's just talking about whatever. And I said, I kind of want to get rid of these groups because I feel like we're not fulfilling
Yeah.
the mission. And the response was, we're not as interested in learning about things. We tie in the learning piece where we can and when we can. They wanted to keep the groups because they're friends.
There's
They
social contacts.
social contacts. And I said,
Yeah.
fine, then that's what we'll just do. So even for the people who are just sitting there and listening, they didn't want to leave it because they just enjoy it and they smile.
Yeah. Well, it's true. I've encouraged people that have all different kinds of issues to find a support group, and they'll say, "No, I can't be talking about any of this stuff." No, I said you don't have to. Just go and be there, and you can listen to other people with the same issues, and that can help you. And you might want to open up, but you don't have to. And that's absolutely true. I mean, I used to be part of it when I lived in California. I did a group once a month, and it was so much fun because part of it was just sitting down. Does anybody have any questions? Anything you want to talk about? And so we do that. And then we just turn the music on and people would dance and we'd have snacks. And and people from different agencies came. So they weren't like all from a group home or a residential program. They were people who sometimes knew each other, but sometimes they didn't. And that was pretty good. Yeah.
And that's what we do once a month. So once a month, we physically get people together. We offer to, and there are organizations from all over the place, different counties, and we come together. And we try not to spend a lot of money. So we meet
Yeah.
at the park pavilion and we
Yeah.
do like yard games and board games and music and just enjoy each other's company. And that's enough for people.
Yeah. It is. And I always think animals help. I mean, really, I can't imagine. I mean, I have a cat. People say, "What are you talking about? A cat makes a difference." So of course it does. Of course it does. It's a living, breathing, warm thing that unconditionally loves me, except when she wakes me up at 6 in the morning and demands to be fed or something. But she does really. She headbutts me, but I don't care. I get up and feed her and go back to bed.
Exactly.
But
Yeah.
I mean, they are really, it makes a difference in people's lives. And, I think some group homes do have, animals, but not a lot. I think
No, and
it's,
it's interesting because prisons and jails are now forming contracts with animal shelters to introduce the use of cats or dogs within the prison as a
wow.
means to maintain one good behavior, but that loneliness and love connection too. And there's actually, I was in Fayette County just the other day, and they're building a new jail and they have a contract with an animal shelter. They're going to be doing that with the inmates too.
Wow. That's awesome.
So we're doing that in prisons. So we could definitely be doing it in group homes.
I mean, and I think about when I used to run the group for LGBT teens and young adults, we had kids coming from kids, coming from group homes, people that had ID or DD, autism, and their staff would bring them to groups. They wouldn't sit in for the group. They'd go to another room and let the person, have privacy. But, there are all kinds of groups in the community, and find out what the people you support are interested in and go there.
David Hinsberger, he used to joke, not all people with disabilities like bowling and bingo. So explore their interests and connect them, right?
Yeah.
And I've really pushed a lot of people, especially people in the autism spectrum. They want social connection. They're just nervous and anxious about how to do it and being accepted. But everybody tells me I don't want to be isolated. I want to be social. And so we work like, okay, well, what are your interests? And a lot of younger people love video games, meetup groups. If you look at meetup groups online, I've done it in the UK for people also. Somebody who liked rollerblading in the UK, I said, okay, then we're going to look for a meetup rollerblading group. Yeah. It's not about connecting based on the disability. It's about connecting based on the interest.
On the interest, exactly. Again, why are other countries doing it and we're not? That's always interesting to me, how Europe does basic sex education. They really do sex education. And by the time a young person graduates from high school, they have a class on what their first sexual encounter should be like for them and their partner, with very specific things. I mean, what a gift to give those young people. And, here we are saying, let's not talk about it. And
even the prison system is different. They have a diversion program, especially arm of the courts, that focus on just working with people with disabilities too.
Oh, wow.
Where we're fighting, now to try to create some of those in the larger counties where 50% of inmates have some form of a disability. So we're kind of working backwards in a lot of ways, and we talk about that all the time.
Yeah. I've said this before on this program, but I have a friend from Australia who said, thank God we got the criminals and you got the Puritans. It just always makes me laugh because it's true. We've got a lot of, oh, don't do that. That's not nice. That's not good. That's a sin, or whatever it might be. Just don't talk about anything that's private. So keep that in the family, well, okay. But suffer in silence doesn't work very well.
No.
It just doesn't. Yeah, I think there are people, within the people that we support that volunteer at animal shelters and walk the dogs, whatever. And there's so many things to do for them to be able to do and to get out. And, always think budgets probably have a whole lot to do with that. And I don't know. I mean, how do you feel about that? You do a lot of work in the system.
I think it's an excuse because there are lots of things that can be done. And you brought up the example of it takes us orchestrating some things. So I try to work with providers and I match people, and I said on personality, on interests, and I facilitate that. Can I share your phone number? Can I give this person your phone number? And try to facilitate that so that they can make connections with people who they're maybe more apt to get along with and enjoy being with. But I feel like unless I'm, and not in all cases, but a lot of cases, unless I'm the one sort of orchestrating and pushing for it, it just doesn't happen.
It's interesting to me how little people understand. I don't mean this in a derogatory way, because I don't understand zippity doodah about math, and I never want to. It's just like a nightmare to me. But there are people who just don't understand sexuality and relationships. They just don't understand. They don't want to understand it because it's so personal and awkward and sinful and all of those things. So they can't talk about it and discuss it. And then nothing happens at all. I love that you work with people, that you can hook people up. I don't mean hook them up, but well, what if that happens?
I've done that too. Happens. I've been a matchmaker too.
Yeah. I just think about the terms that are so fairly new to older people, hookups and whatever. But yes, absolutely. It just does. I made little notes, and I think we've really talked about that. I think, when I think about autism and people who are not diagnosed but have autism, and there are many, many people, whether they're in the DD system or not, but are not diagnosed, they're just kind of seen as strange. they're weird. That guy's weird, or he's just so like rude. I remember Zuckerman, testifying in front of House committee or something. And one of the legislators asked him a question, and he said, I don't understand your question, because it was so simple. I mean, it was about technology, but I understood the question. And you know how good I am at technology, but I understood the question. And the man thought he was being rude, but I would suspect that Zuckerman, like many of the very successful people in the technology world, are on the spectrum. They're brilliant, but their social skills are not so hot. But when you have people that look like they're just being rude, nobody wants to bother with them. And oh, he's just weird. And I think of Temple Grandin, who I mean, I've never actually met her, but I know that she was experiencing some of that, and she asked someone to teach her social skills. Like, tell me what to do. If someone says this, what should I say? Because if you said, do you like this new sweater, and they don't like it, they're going to say no. You or I might say, oh, it looks nice on you. Really lie, but you wouldn't want it, and I wouldn't want it. It's just interesting, because I think there are lots of people, on the spectrum. And then we also know that people on the spectrum often try to find social contacts on the internet that can cause some pretty serious results. So we have lots of people with autism in prison.
Consider the loneliness piece too in the internet. Just trying to connect with people online. That's one of the recommendations that I was reading about. Connect with people online. And I've tried that. But my experience, and somebody who is pretty quick and smart to spot a liar and a schemer, I think I'm a human lie detector just walking the earth, and that's sad. But it's more often than not, it turns into this attempt to bamboozle you in some way, financially. And it's to me, it's just so disgusting and so exhausting that I don't want to deal with it. But I can see how people really get sucked into that. A beautiful woman's professing her love to you in 3 days. Yeah, that's not normal.
No, absolutely not.
Red flag number one.
Yeah. When you were saying you were a walking lie detector, that's interesting, because I don't think I'm a walking lie detector. But one of the things that happens with me, and I tried it when I'm doing classes for adults. No, I so miss doing that with ID and DD and autism. One of the things I always say is, if you're ever in a situation and the hair on the back of your neck stands up, it feels a little tingly, get out of there. Just walk away and say, nice to meet you, get out of there. That happens to me all the time. Just recently, I was at a meeting, and there's a woman, and she's quite successful in what she's done in life. But there's something about her that I'm like, just keep your distance. And, I'm not rude, but there's just a thing. And that's like evolution that is with us, but we intellectualize it all away. But we shouldn't, because there are things that we keep us safe, have for centuries, millennials, actually, like forever.
Yeah, but going with your gut instinct, and again, kind of looking at just tips to help with loneliness. One of the things that I kept finding and reading about was how we have to take care of ourselves. We have to love ourselves. And I think for me, even though loneliness has been such a problem, it's learning to love who I am and be okay with that. That's been so important too. So one of the recommendations was take yourself on a date, do something special for yourself. Some people might like to go to a spa or have their hair done or their nails done. Some people might like to wash their car or whatever, or cook a special meal. But just doing things that just bring you joy.
Yeah. So are you getting your hair done?
Yes. Can you tell?
I can. Well, you're absolutely right, and I think about that, because I like theater, and I like, in the summer, outdoor music concerts, but I don't have anybody to go with, and I even go to movies, and I go to some of those things myself too. But the reality is, I know if I went, I probably would meet people that I'd connect with, and then I would have someone to go with. But when you're feeling kind of depressed and lonely, you don't. You just become a martyr, and you just go, it's not nice. We shouldn't be martyrs.
Yeah, but it is hard when you're by yourself and you look around too, because I'm often in a restaurant by myself, especially when traveling, and I'll look around and I'm the only person by myself. And then I start to feel, oh my God, are people looking at me? Are they wondering like what's wrong with me? And then I get
That's
even more depressed because I see couples together, I see groups of friends together, and I'm going, what is wrong with me?
oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
But I've heard the people that I support say that too, that they get so jealous, they get so upset because they're always alone.
Yeah.
That it's hard to put themselves out there and do these things that they enjoy because the response is just it's too painful.
When I was in California, I worked with a young woman who was an absolute delight. She really was. And she was being taken advantage of. She had a boyfriend and they had a consensual relationship, and then it ended, but she really wanted to have a relationship with him, but he was asking her to do things that she just didn't want to do, physical things. Anyway, she figured it all out, and she said, if you were my boyfriend, you wouldn't, if you were my friend, you wouldn't ask me to do that. So she got herself together, and then she was doing really well. And then I was moving back to Pennsylvania, and I hadn't seen her in a couple of months, but I was so fond of her. So I called the group home and said, I'd kind of like to have lunch with Jane. I don't know, I'll call her Jane. Would that be okay? And they said, oh, of course. And we went out to lunch, the two of us. We had a lovely lunch. And at the end of it, she said, I'm going to miss you. I wish you weren't going. And I said, yep, me too. And we text once in a while. But she said, nobody has ever done anything like this for me before. She was like in her late 20s, 30s, probably. Like, how is that even possible? Go out to lunch with somebody you like. We get into the taking care of mode and don't think about the emotional part of it. It's like superficial. Not that people don't care about the individual that's being supported, but they do it in ways that doesn't help the loneliness. It just, like, you could feed somebody or go to a movie or go for a walk, and that helps, but it's not what they need. They need friends and companions and activities, and yeah, and just being part of a group. I know exactly what you mean. I the other night I actually had dinner with a friend, and just like you said, you go out and you're alone. When I go out and I'm with someone, it's like, wow, this is different.
Yeah.
And it was fun, to
But
be
like
sure.
even at home, so if you're direct support staff and you're supporting one or two people, I so many times would just sit and do the things with them that they enjoy. I may personally hate it, but it's important to just have that connection, even with my own son. I mean, his interests are completely different than mine, but he really looks forward to asking me to sit down and watch a movie with him.
Oh,
And if you
that's
care
nice.
for someone, right? This
Yeah.
is where I teach social faking. We have to just fake our way through it. And if we want to fill loneliness for that person and even ourselves, but send the message, I care about you.
Yeah, it's true. I just feel bad for people that don't have anything. I mean, you and I can, to some degree, continue what we're doing, and we'll be fine. We have each other, and you have a lot of friends out there. I mean, I know you do, but we are fine. We're lonely, but we're okay. But how can we change it for people that are, like, contained in these small areas, and their exposure to the world is so limited? And many people, with or without disabilities, that would be true. Not just the people we support, but the older people. I can relate to that for sure. But there are people who are living in programs, or, like, not so much independent senior centers, but that spectrum of, from one end all the way to a nursing home, and they don't really go anywhere either, except there are other people there, and that makes a difference. And they have bingo, and they have whatever they might have, a speaker. And I think that's another thing that would be really helpful. Have monthly groups, or even have someone come to an agency and talk about something, talk about loneliness. That would be something that I think would be a good thing to talk about.
And if you don't have the money to spend, look at TED Talks. I've done that where I've pulled up
Oh yeah.
TED Talks on topics and we review them together and then we talk about them.
Yeah,
Just so that there's constantly some form of learning and connection, but it opens the dialogue for how a person is feeling then too. So we
exactly.
know more and we can do more then too.
Yeah. Yeah, when I'm doing classes for adults with disabilities around sexuality, and we'll be talking about sex, and I'll say, well, what is it? And they'll get some response, and I say, tell me more. And does anybody else know what she's talking about? And does anybody have another idea about? But it's the dialogue, it's the communication back and forth, and it opens doors for staff to understand what they're dealing with and what they need, and can they fill those gaps? And or on the other end of that is there's someone that is at great risk here, just from what they just said.
And a person doesn't need to talk in order to have connection, to feel loneliness. This one
Right.
person I support keeps jumping into my head. I just adore him. But he has very limited, unreliable speaking at times. And, we've worked on different things like the spell to communicate, and he can say some things, but there's just this big push, like, because you have autism or because you're non-speaking or non-reliable speaker, do this. But what I discovered, he loves art, and we just started doing some painting, and he is fabulous at it. Well, he got selected. One of his paintings got selected to be showcased in a gallery here in Pittsburgh.
Oh my goodness.
And I went to the opening to see it, and his parents brought him, and he's kind of flying around. And I've had people say to me, well, you need to get him to like spell on the board and communicate how he's feeling. It was very clear how he was feeling.
Look at him.
He was so happy, right?
Yeah.
And he will communicate, and he does communicate. But, I looked at him and I said, these are your people. And what I found, Sharon, was he was answering, he was responding to people, he was interacting with people in that art gallery because those were his people.
Oh yeah, of course. Of course.
Makes a difference.
Did you see the pop-up on my screen just now? It said my internet is unstable.
I'm glad your internet's unstable and not your life.
That's true.
I might need that little pop-up to say, Shawn, your life is unstable right now.
The social group that you have, how many?
We meet once a month in person. The staff that work with me, they do weekly meetings on Zoom. We have over 20 people who attend.
It's always like focused on a topic. I mean, is there a time that you're doing that? And then does it then become people just interact with each other?
We always have a topic, and I would say out of the hour, maybe if we get 20 to 30 minutes in of actually staying on topic about the topic, we're doing good. But they want to talk. They want to ask how somebody's day went. They want to talk and ask about how someone's work is going.
Yeah.
They love to socialize. They want to socialize.
Don't we all? I mean, that's what that's what most animals do. I mean, but
right?
Human animals, certainly.
We've just gotten so far away. My grandfather used to talk about how someday we're going to go back to generations of families living together again, because it will be economically required, but also spiritually required for us to sustain life.
Wow.
I mean, and you think about it, I remember as a kid, I think that's one of the contributing factors to loneliness too. Every Friday night, it was at one grandparent's house. Every Sunday, it was at another grandparent's house. You never ate a meal by yourself. You were always together.
Yeah.
And we've just gotten so far away from things like that too.
Yeah, my grandmother lived with us, and she was sort of the core of everything. And as a little girl, I remember that my grandmother called them the maiden ladies. There were two elderly women that lived next door, and looking back, they were a couple. They weren't sisters, they were a couple, but they were the maiden ladies. An Irish name, McGuire or something like that, plural of the name, the McGuires. And I would say, can I go see the McGuires? And my grandmother would say, yes, you most certainly can. And, they'd have me sing little songs, and they always had cookies. And I mean, it just, there was a community there. And then there were all the kids in the neighborhood all around, and we'd do hopscotch and hide and seek and kick the can. And, it was just, you could reach out and somebody would be there for you, or somebody would knock on your door and you'd be there for them. But it's not the same anymore. I mean,
so has the internet and electronic technology, has it ruined us in some way?
Well, I think it's a blessing and a curse. I really do. I mean, there's some amazing things that you can find on the internet. I really do think it's a big problem, because people are texting each other instead of even picking up the phone and talking to them.
Yes, yes.
I want to hear their voices. I want to hear their voices and see their faces. We're going to do a Zoom with my California gang. I don't know how we're going to do that because there's so many out there, but I miss seeing them. I get texts from like my kids will call me, but my grandkids will text me, and I love that. I love that. And sometimes pictures along with it. But, I want to see their faces. I want to see their twinkling eyes and their smiles. And I wish that when we do that, that I could have the smell of like the shampoo in their hair. And it would be nice to be able to incorporate that in a Zoom.
Someone's going to invent it. See, we're not going to need human interaction anymore.
That's right. Yeah. That's absolutely true. People have like if you could automate a not human slave, so you don't want to, enslave anybody, of course, but someone who could just say nice things to you and, you want some coffee or you want to go for a walk, I know what that is. That's the person we're missing. That's the part of our life that's not there. But when, people with disabilities, how many times have they moved? And, they went from their birth home to somewhere, depending on their age. It could have been in one of the institutions, or they could have been in foster care. And they keep losing and moving and losing friends. And it's really hard. It's really, really hard.
And how good of a job are we doing in terms of matching people before they move into? I think that's always been a downfall. So there's an open room, there's an open bed. You're male or you're female, we'll put you in.
I know.
I don't like a majority of people just based on their personality alone. So you have to be very careful with how you match people.
Yeah, that could be a disaster. Matching with the wrong person would be worse, much worse than being alone.
Yes, that's what I say.
Yeah.
Shawn, just remember your past relationships.
Yeah.
Being alone is better than being in the wrong relationship.
Yeah, the gentleman that knew my husband that was in a nursing home, apparently when nobody's there except the two men who are sharing the room, this gentleman that was the architect screams at the top of his lungs, "Holy Mary, Mother of God, take me, take me," but like a big booming voice. And and then my friend, he can't sleep and he's stressed and he's sad because he can't help this guy. And it's just that was just a really interesting day. And to see him come out of that and be present with us was a joy. That he is, it really was. It was a gift for me to be able to give him that little piece. But it's really difficult. It's how we deal with it, and can we deal with it, and do we understand what's going on? I mean, some people withdraw and get quiet and whatever. Other people don't. They snap out at people and get angry because they're lonely and isolated. And they'll say he or she has a behavior. Oh God, don't we all? But they're not looking behind it. They're not looking behind to see what the behavior, what is it, because they're bored to death, or because maybe they had somebody in a day program that they worked with that they liked and they died. Maybe a staff person they worked with years ago passed away and they found out about it. That would be so terribly sad. But if people don't know what's going on, oh yeah, they died a couple of years ago. Like, what?
Try things too. I work with so many people that they'll say no to everything we suggest in terms of social activities for whatever reason. One guy, he had been arrested and he was all over the news. And for years, he said no to social activities because he was afraid that people would recognize him and judge him.
Yeah.
So I was just like, I don't think anyone's going to recognize you. One, that was so many years ago. No one cares at this point. Two, you look completely different. No one's going to put two and two together. But three, let's just try. So if you tell me as soon as you get there, you absolutely hate it and you can't do it, I'm not going to be mad at you. We'll leave. Let's just try. But what I've discovered is when you go there, they tend to enjoy it then too.
But you and I do both work with people that have, problematic sexual behavior or offending. And that's a really hard group of people to get support for and get them back out in the community living happy, healthy lives, which they're absolutely capable of doing.
Or there are some people that just make like fatalistic social mistakes too. So, getting upset because someone didn't text them right away, but they see that read message receipt was on. They see that the person responded or read the message, but they haven't responded. So they'll barrage you with messages about, well, you read my message, why aren't you responding? So it's teaching people about that sort of thing too.
Yeah.
That not everybody responds. I have some people, they send me 500 text messages in a day. I haven't responded to a single one simply because there's nothing for me to say.
I have a friend who verbally does that, and it's always like I'm tired when I get off the phone. They have so many complaints about so many things, and they're so unhappy about so many things. And so, what are you going to do about it?
Well,
Yeah,
sometimes the hard part is taking a good hard look at ourselves too, and saying, well, what can I do differently in
exactly.
order to change the outcome in terms of my relationships with people and follow through. Even in my own family, I hear people say, oh, I haven't talked to this person for so long and I miss. Then pick up the phone. You have to put forth the effort or nothing is going to change.
That's right. Until it does, and then sometimes it's too late.
We're alive today. We're here today. So we
Right.
have to make the most of our opportunities and our relationships today. We can't treat people like shit and expect
No,
that we're going to have meaningful relationships.
no, we sure can't. And I don't know. I think that we ask so much of direct support professionals. They're doing the best they can, and we're asking them to do more. But I think they want to do more. They want to be supportive of the people that they're there for, but they're stretched pretty thin.
Thank you for joining us for today's episode. Please be sure to check back for our next episode coming soon.